6 o'clock. Thank you for being here. This is the building committee, and we're hoping
Hello.
that you're going to go right down through the questions and do a presentation for us. And then the last 15 or 20 minutes, you'll have an hour. The last 15 or 20 minutes will be for the committee to ask questions. And then we'll just kind of wrap things up at the end.
Perfect.
Great.
Sounds great.
I'll
Thanks
let
for
you
having
go.
us.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting us. Let's see. Let's just start at what should be the beginning, but there we go. Are you seeing my screen, or do we need to hit something?
Now, we don't have the ability to share, Ellen.
We don't.
No.
Oh, well, then we should have certainly sent you something before this. So we can't put anything on screen and have you see it.
No, but if you want to email something to us, I can make sure the entire committee gets it.
All right, I can do that. You won't be able to get it during this presentation, however, it would be after the fact, right?
Some people will, they can get it on their phone, or Chris has a laptop.
Okay, well, let's try that.
These Zoom meetings are always a little bit of a challenge, aren't they?
Right, it never fails that something, if anything can go wrong, it will, right?
Well, we've kept the share screen option closed off to the public because these are public meetings, so that we don't get Zoom bombed, which we did have that happen
Right.
at a select board meeting,
Right.
so.
I see, yeah, you don't want that.
No.
So let's see here.
I'll tell you an example of a meeting I was at in Augusta that the Maine Uniform Building and Code Group had a Zoom meeting, and somebody came in with some rather graphic information, and so we had to cancel the meeting. Then the state went to the Microsoft Teams platform for whatever reason and left the Zoom behind. So yeah, it happens.
Okay, so the only email address that I have is yours, Linda.
That's
So,
fine, I'll forward it to everyone.
okay, all right. So we did, in our slide presentation, we did answer all of your questions. So I am just going to go through them. Unfortunately, I don't have a big printout, so let me see how I can do this. I will shrink this, and I'm gonna have to be sort of watching it while I talk to you. So our team is myself, Mike, who is on Mike Pullen, and I'll let Mike introduce himself, but also Ray Shelley Lazat, who's my partner here at Artifacts, and she's a civil engineer, and Scott Homer, who also is in-house, who is our structural engineer. So we form the core team. In addition, we've added Hewitt and Whitney, which is right down the street from you all in Winthrop. We've worked with them for, over 10 years now, doing our mechanical and electrical work. So Colin's the electrical engineer and Ken is the mechanical engineer. They're probably on one of your other teams at least. So I'm sure you'll be familiar with them. And then the last person we've added to our team is PCM Preferred Construction Management, and they basically provide cost estimating information for us. They're professional cost estimators. We've discovered that they are so accurate in their estimates that it really gives us a great deal of comfort to know that when we come up with a number and say this is the approximate cost, when it goes out to bid, we've been within 2% of the final bid. So we're very, very pleased to have them on the team, and also provided as part of the information that I'm sending you as a team role matrix. So it basically, besides listing all the members on the team and everything in our scope of work, we've sort of highlighted who does what, who's responsible for it, who has shared responsibility, who's a support person in that for that scope and at that time. So kind of that matrix makes it pretty clear who's expected to do what. Which was, I think, your first question there. Mike, do you want to just say a little bit about yourself?
Well,
Send him the link, Sarah.
yes, Linda, is everybody able to get that information, or it's on
Yeah,
its
as
way?
soon as Kristen gets it, she's gonna send it. For some reason, your email won't come up in my phone, Steve. Comes up in my computer at work, I don't know.
Well,
You got it? Okay, Chris has got
Well,
it.
I'm Mike Pullen. I'm an architect. I would be the project manager for your project. All of our team members, Ellen and I, Shelley and Scott, in-house, as well as Hugh and Whitney, will all be doing the building assessments of the original Monmouth Academy building. You'll see in our presentation that we're very familiar with historic buildings. It's a lot of the work that we do, and they always begin with assessments, or largely do begin with assessments. So once we know more about the building and its conditions and what needs to be done to it and what its capabilities are, we'll be better able to help you all to see where we go with what needed renovations there are, and in our programming aspect, what best fits in the building. So I'll be working with you for that. And I'll be with you, as Ellen and Scott and Shelley are, through the entire project. We don't stop being involved in the project once it starts. We stay involved from the very onset to the day, a year after it's built, when we have a warranty review with the contractor. We're still there with you through that process. So when you get a chance to look at that team role matrix, Ellen's done a good job of itemizing everybody's tasks throughout the entire scope of the work, from the beginning assessment all the way through till the very end of the project. A specialty that I kind of bring to projects is my ability to render and help our clients to see clearly through perspectives and sketches and renderings what the finished product's going to look like. That's worth a lot when you're in a municipal project. You're in a project that you need to sell to others and get commitment and buy-in from others in the community. So that's one specialty that kind of sets me aside a little bit. That's all I need to say, I think, about myself. Thank you.
So that's our project team. That's your brief description. The second question you had was to describe a project that we've been involved in that would be relevant. And so we had numerous ones, and actually there were two that we kind of went back and forth on. So I'm going to try and give you a brief summary of the first one, and hopefully maybe the second one as well. But the first one is Stewart Library, which is the Corinna, is also the Corinna town office. And it's a historic building. It's a huge building. On the ground floor, they have the town office. They have a small archive. They have the town library. And on the second floor is a large meeting room. And it has a beautiful clock tower, which is the centerpiece of it, and also a full height basement. But nothing was accessible except the first floor by virtue of a giant ramp. And when we were approached by what was the historic Save Historic Stewart Library, I guess. And at the time, the town was about to basically remove the clock tower from the building because another engineering firm had told them that they couldn't save it. And so we came in and we said, have you talked to Maine MHPC, Maine Historic Preservation Commission? And they said, well, I think we asked them about it and they said it was okay. And I said, I don't think so, because they would never tell you that you could, remove a historic part of a building. It was on the National Register of Historic Places that would remove it from the register. So we called up MHPC and they sent someone out almost like within the week to look at the project and offered to give the town money in order to save the tower. And so we worked with the town, did an assessment, as Mike described it, of the building and the tower. And a program for repairing, rehabilitating the building as it exists, and also provided plans and ultimately the design and the construction administration for a new stair tower and elevator for the building. So I think that's fairly similar to what you have going on. And in that regard, you know, pretty comparable in the services and in what we see as being part of the process. But the other thing that we're working on right now, which is very similar, is the Academy building for the University of Southern Maine, which is the oldest building, the oldest educational building that the University of Maine owns. And it is a wood frame building. It's not a masonry building. Looks very similar to your historic Academy building. And we went through that and did a very, very rigorous assessment of that, and have worked with the university to have phased rehabilitation, because there was nowhere near enough money to do all the work that was needed. So we have to pull off pieces of the front porch and reconstruct the front porch and re-side the entire front face of the building. So it's a fairly major project. We've been working with them for 2 years on it, but I think that that's another comparable kind of project where we had to do the assessment, figure out what was needed, and then figure out how to phase it so they could actually afford it. I mean, and also if you, I know you said questions at the end, and I know that can slow us down, but if you do have any questions in the middle of it, we certainly would be happy to answer them. You also, the next question was the scope of our property survey work, what we expected to complete. What we provided was a list of what we include in our property survey. So we basically have a format we use, and we, you know, go down the list, and it includes everything from the foundation, the site, the structure, the exterior envelope, the interior finishes, the mechanical system, the electrical system. We go through that. We visit the site first, we photograph the building, we measure the building, we create plans. We then perform an assessment of all the existing conditions based on, you know, so we have a plan to start from to mark everything up on. And then we evaluate and describe and rate these areas. So they are described as good, fair, poor condition, right? So we know what we have to replace, what we have to repair, what we just have to provide with a nicer appearance. And so that's, I think that's spelled out pretty clearly for you in the material you'll get. Next question you had was about limited funds, and you would like to understand how we manage our design costs so that we don't get surprised and we have the services needed to plan, design, bid, and build the project. Okay, so what we did in our proposal was we looked at what you suggested you needed to do, and we used our prior experiences to say, well, we think it's going to cost about this much, right? Which was a little bit more than what you have for funding, not a huge amount, but still more than you have. And then we based our fee on a fixed amount as kind of a what we believe from our prior experience is an appropriate fee. And it's a fixed fee. We don't expect to increase that. We expect to find surprises. We do a lot of historic restoration work. I've never been on a historic project where there wasn't some surprise. Sometimes they're good. More often they're not so good. But that's what we do. We cannot, however, control construction costs, right? We have no, especially right now, we have a very volatile market. So our ability to control construction costs is, you know, not there. So, you know, but we based our number on what we think are the construction costs at this moment in time. And just because construction costs increase, our fee won't increase. So how do we control our fee? It's set. That's what you pay. Let's see here. I don't know how that one got in here. I got some more. Manage design costs. I got a slide in the middle of this that's not the right. That's just an additional project slide, which you will be able to see, but was not supposed to be part of this because it's not part of the questions. Your next question was, do you feel this project is best suited for design, bid, build, or construction manager for delivery? And if you, the town, uses the construction manager form of delivery, does our proposal include working with the town to procure a CM and coordination? Okay, so I'm going to let Mike in a second take over that discussion about the construction manager. We found that different towns have had different experiences, and that some towns are, happier with that experience. Relatively small, relatively complex projects seem to work for CMs, and as I said, I'll let Mike talk about that. But in terms of our fee includes that possibility, and in fact, it could potentially decrease because we have cost estimating in our fee, and if you're going to use a construction manager, we would expect to transfer the cost estimating over to the construction manager. So that is a piece of the fee that might actually reduce. In terms of working with a construction manager, a good construction manager actually lessens a lot of the issues that we have in some of the research we have to do because they do it for us. And Mike, you want to add on to that?
Well, you kind of stole my thunder there, but
Oh,
I
I'm
would
sorry.
say, I will say that in projects where we do construction management, it's always a great opportunity to get the trades and the contractor involved during the design phase. That's what that does. Normally we'll bring the construction manager in when we finished the first phase of design, which is schematic design. That way, from that point on, you're getting real cost information based on actual material costs and current conditions for the trades. You're getting a contractor that's committed to your project, which in today's world is worth a lot because schedules are such that we're finding that projects are being delayed significantly because of the lack of trades to cover the work. So you're getting that commitment early in your project. You're getting real cost information that you can take to the town and others with confidence that you're going to be really on target for what the project costs, and you're getting your selected CM. We would still help you with the selection of the CM. It was a process that we could help you with there that helps you to find out who might be best suited for this type of work. And some of the questions you might ask is, hey, give us examples of historic preservation work that you've done in the past, and what were your experiences with that? So particularly, you're going to get the trades, the commitment, and contractor on your schedule. That's worth an awful lot in today's market. So we'll help you through that. Thanks, Ellen.
So I guess your next question is, some proposers mentioned historic preservation. Please explain what your thoughts are and whether or not this project is a good candidate based upon town objectives and costs. So obviously, you know our feelings pretty much already. We think this is an excellent candidate for historic designation and historic preservation. We have a lot of experience in this, and I will tell you this, most people are afraid of it. They think that they're limited by what they can do or can't do when they have a historic project or put a building on the historic register. The reality is that it provides significant opportunities, especially funding opportunities, that there are multitudes of funding opportunities out there for historic projects, and you won't get that money if you have a historic building and you're not treating it with the respect that it deserves. Listing the building puts no controls on the project unless you want federal or state money. Okay, so in other words, you can do certain things. Now, once you do those things, if they do not meet the criteria of the Secretary of the Interior standards, you may have opted out of the game, right? So you put yourself in the game by getting listed on the National Register, and then you do something like put vinyl replacement windows in, and you're kind of out of the game again. So, you know, people say, well, it costs me more. I have to do these materials that that may cost more. But what we have found, and I would argue, is that those materials are resilient materials. And so if you're concerned about the life span of the building, the life expectancy of the building, and I mean, you have an almost 200-year-old building, right? So you know that those materials that they built it with are very resilient materials. And they're really the issues that we find in most historic buildings aren't the original materials or the original design. It's stuff that was done in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, like asbestos, right? Or like they put stucco over something to hide, you know, a crack, and then the crack's still there, and getting worse, but it's hidden. Or they've glued insulation onto the foundation and trapped condensation and freeze-thaw cycles. We find those kind of issues. We don't find very often anything that was inappropriately done in the original historic building. So you get a very resilient building, and a building that you don't have to invest a lot of money in every year or every 5 years or every 15 years. Your wood windows are still around 200 years later. Your vinyl are only warranted for well, now they're warranted a little longer, but they used to be only warranted for 15 or 20 years. So I think it's an excellent candidate for historic designation and historic preservation. I absolutely think it's the right thing to do. And I think that Corinna learned that lesson very quickly, because they were in the same place. It was on the National Register, but they were like, well, so what? We should still do these things, And they found out, no, if they do it right, they really get a lot of support for it.
But our problem is it would take 6 months to get it on the National Register if they would accept it.
Well, it's what's called, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. I was going to say, we work with the State Historic Preservation Office often to get buildings listed as eligible. A listing from Kirk Money, the director of the Historic Preservation Commission, that states that the building is eligible, which I'm sure this would be, does not take a very long time to do. And we can proceed with improvements and other planning for the project as long as it's National Register listed as an eligible building. So yes, the process itself from end to be listed does potentially take months of time, but we'll get you an eligibility letter early in the project. That's what you're after.
And also we've discovered if the state takes an interest in it, sometimes they assist significantly with that listing. So, you have to, yeah, it can be daunting, but we've done it enough that we don't find it daunting at this point.
No.
So, and I think that was all. Oh, this one. Okay, please expand on what your proposal includes for construction services. So there's a whole page there. I mean, basically, we are your representative during the construction phase. We visit the site at, appropriate intervals. It could be once a week. It could be every 2 weeks. Sometimes we're at a site 3 days in a week. It depends on what's happening, what phase we're at, and how critical the work being performed is. Okay, we keep you informed about the process and project and quality of the work. So if the contractor is doing something that deviates from the construction documents, the contract documents, or the schedule, or there's defects or there's deficiencies, anything we observe, we let you know, right? Obviously the owner is the one that has to decide to say stop that or do it over or whatever, but we make recommendations. We review and certify the amounts due to the contractor, okay, on a monthly basis. We review the contractor's submittal. So if he's going to use this kind of light fixture or this kind of, these bricks or this kind of tile, we review that and we approve it or take other appropriate action on those submittals. We review and respond to requests for information. We prepare change orders if there are change orders, and typically our projects have change orders from the owner, not from the contractor. We have very few change orders that come from the contractor. In other words, a lack of something in the contract. It's typically an owner's change order. But anyway, we prepare those. We conduct site review to determine the date or dates of substantial completion. So if the contractor says he's done, we go and look at it and say, yes, it's done, or it's not done. We, when it is done, the contractor should deliver certain warranties on equipment, for example, HVAC equipment or light fixtures or any other equipment. We review those and forward them to you, and we issue a final certificate for payment to the contractor based on a final, in this case, we call it an inspection, indicating that to the best of our knowledge, the work is correct and done correctly. So that's all the site. I mean, there's not much we don't do during the site, and as well, our consultants, mechanical and electrical, will also review. They don't do commissioning, okay, where they test the equipment to, you know, for the air volumes and that kind of thing. They don't do that, but they do review that the installation is appropriate. So that question. Next one, review your approach to estimating construction costs and your opinion on the adequacy of the current budget. So we have a history of accurate construction cost estimates within 2%. We based our fee on what we believe to be an appropriate construction cost for the project as defined. And our opinion is that not knowing but just considering sort of a base level of interior finishes and rooms, and, you know, sort of a $1 per square foot number that we were reasonably comfortable with, and then knowing the cost of an elevator and all that, we thought you were a little low, but it wasn't a substantial. I'm sure the town doesn't want to hear it. You know, anything is substantial, right, above the allotted budget, but it's close. And as we got closer into the project, so for example, once we programmed what we were actually going to do with the existing academy building, and once we programmed the size of the whatever addition is required, once we did that and we had our schematic design, then we would prepare a more detailed cost estimate that would you know, that would be the first step in determining exactly where we were relative to the budget. But knowing what your budget is, that's what we're going to work toward. It's just, again, the volatility of the construction cost right now is just, it's really, I mean, my personal story is that I'm redoing an upstairs bathroom, and I'm doing things that aren't much different from my bathroom that I did downstairs 5 years ago, and the costs are all 1.5 times more for materials and minimum. And then that's if I can even get them. So that's the other problem with construction right now. So that's but you know, next month some things may come down and some things may go up. We don't control that, unfortunately. We'd love to, but we work with the knowledge that we have, which is, I think, fairly accurate and complete. And then you asked, discuss any services that you have not included that might be included. Again, the town has limited funding and needs to confirm the designer's scope and budget. Also, please comment on any geotechnical needs and if those services are covered in your proposal. So, as I said, we have a civil engineer, my business partner, right? The two of us are the owners of Artifacts. She's a civil engineer, so I asked her to look at it. And her feelings were that because this is an existing site that's been, you know, it's been occupied, the site's been used for an extended period of time with no, as we know now, I mean, we haven't looked at it, but no significant issues that would belie the opinion that the site is okay, right? So we didn't see any parts of the building cracking off other parts of the building. If that's the case, there may be soil issues, but with that, we would expect limited geotechnical exploration. So, you know, maybe 2 test pits. What we think we're going to need is when we remove some of those buildings, there's going to be replacement soils, right? it's not going to be appropriate to just knock the building into the hole and call it good. So the replacement soils, we would need geotechnical to specify what that might be. But otherwise, I think it's the geotechnical investigation we would expect to would be limited. The other thing is that we based our fees on this being a historic renovation, and that would include certain material testing and confirmation that we would expect that the town might have to pay for, none of which is very expensive. Things like the masonry, the mortar, you know, so that when we do work on it, everything matches, right? So it doesn't look like anything other than if we want to add something, for example, in Corinna, we added this stair tower and the elevator, and it's fairly contemporary materials, because with a historic building, when you add something, you don't actually want to make it look like it grew from the existing. You want to make it look like something that's from the 21st century. So, but what we do to the existing building, we want everything to match. We want to make sure that we're using the appropriate materials. So there's, I mean, if that's $2,000, I'd be surprised. And that would be the only cost or services that, because you've had your asbestos testing and all that done, so that's typically the biggest expense. The next thing we provided, which you don't have, or you may have on your phone screens, is a process that basically states, you know, every step that we would take to get to a biddable set of drawings, and then construction, and then additional. So just for the understanding of that. Additionally, we were provided some information on energy efficiency, improving it in historic buildings, some documents. One is a Maine preservation document. The other is the Secretary of the Interior's document for sustainability, you know, guidelines for sustainability. And then the third one is eight steps for a greener building, which is also, I think, was that an MHPC document, Mike, or was
Yes.
that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we included that for your perusal, just to sort of understand that, you know, our saying is the greenest building is the existing building, because there's so much embodied carbon in that building that tearing buildings down, right, you lose all that. If you can work with the existing, you're already on your path to sustainability, and that's what we like to do. So I'm thinking we're close to our time, although I think I tend to speak a little fast, so I apologize for that if I just sort of left you all. Hopefully you have some questions, but I hope we answered the questions that you had posed for us on paper.
Committee questions? Larry?
If we, for example, put heat pumps in that building, would we get a rebate from Efficiency Maine like homeowners get?
There are Efficiency Maine rebates. There's a lot of different efficiency rebates for commercial buildings. One of the biggest ones you're going to get is for light fixtures. There's right now there's some really big Efficiency Maine light fixture rebates. You know, the thing is that all those rebates change, right? They're in this month, they run out of money, they got another one next month. But right now, light fixtures are a huge rebate. Heat pumps can provide a rebate. That's why we have Hewitt & Whitney on board. That's why we have a mechanical engineer, because Ken is very aware of where the rebates are and what elements to specify that qualify for rebates, as is Colin with the electrical fixtures. So when the project is ready to be constructed and bid, all of the fixtures that'll be in there that we will have specified will be ones that qualify for those Efficiency Maine rebates.
Yeah, and let me just add that in today's world, and I know you've all seen this, evidence of this, But LED light fixtures, the new LED light fixtures are so dramatically better than fluorescent lights of the past or incandescent bulbs. They give a much more uniform light. They last much, much longer. You don't have the issue of having to dispose of fluorescent bulbs and all. There's Ellen's back. You're bright. So there's a lot of other benefits that are built into making your building efficient. And Efficiency Maine's got some great programs, as Ellen said, to take advantage of. Yeah.
In looking at the picture that you provided of the Corinna building,
Yeah.
when I'm looking at the picture on my right-hand side, is that where you put the elevator?
Yes.
And
Yes.
Okay.
If
Was
you're
it a
looking at the,
full-size-
I'm sorry, what was that?
Was it a full-size elevator or one that I think is called like a Lula?
Yeah, no, it was a real elevator. Lula elevators are not acceptable in commercial projects often. So what we did in Corinna's case was we actually took out an old staircase, and in where this old staircase was, we installed a 3-stop elevator from basement, first floor, and upstairs. And then on the front, we built an open stair system that basically replaced the stairs that were taken out. So all done under the review of and acceptance of the Historic Commission in Augusta. So we work with them on historic buildings from the very onset. We get in touch with them initially and see what advantages they're going to bring to your project. And this Monmouth building is beautiful. This is a really special academy building. It actually looks an awful lot like, I'm in Holden now, but I lived in Hamden. And if you've ever seen Hamden Academy's original building, which was about the same period, they're almost identical. Hamden's is a 2-story, but so similar in design and shape and size and materials. Looks very much like Hamden Academy's 1834 building. So you've got a really special building there.
We also have a lot of information on the addition of the portico and porch, about the architect that did that and when that was added. So yeah.
Harry Cochran.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Harry Cochran.
Well, it is a very
Artist.
special building. And I think that a lot of the people who voted to save the building, the biggest thing is the front, looking at that building, the front facade. To those of us who have lived and breathed this, that's Monmouth Academy. That's what we think of. So that is very important to us to try to maintain as much of that original look as possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in that regard, that front facade, the kind of Greek revival style, is very similar to the building that Ellen mentioned at USM, which is their Academy Hall. And that had 4 columns in the front, similar design, very similar design, supporting a pediment above in wood. So we're very familiar with wood and how to keep wood alive and going to serve for more years.
Right.
So,
That's why we have difficulty deciding which project to talk about, because they both are applicable to different pieces of your project.
How's your current workload? Do you have enough time to take on this project? I know most people in the construction industry are quite busy right now. So I'm just curious if what your feeling is to make sure you'd be able to staff this as needed.
We actually are available. In fact, we'd love to start it sooner rather than later. We have a couple of people who pretty much we reserve for historic projects. One is a young architect in training who it's just, he loves historic work. And we just finished a survey for the city of Bangor of the historic district, sort of a house to house, filling out the karma forms for the state. So we just finished that project, and we don't really have a good historic project for him to start right this second. So that would be fabulous. Yeah, which doesn't mean that Mike and I and Scott and Shelley aren't going to participate. We all are, but but we
We're
have. a
ready, we're ready
dedicated
and
person.
anxious to go.
Okay, thank you.
What about your subcontractors like Hewitt and Whitney? Would they be available as needed, or would they say that we have to wait?
Nope, they've told us they're available, so.
Yeah, when Ellen's got them on a short leash. She's able to get Colin and Ken's attention, and I'll tell you, they do respond. They're excellent to work with too, by the way.
And they have to work on like, 6 projects for every one we work on, because they only work on that one piece of it, so, yeah. It
Good.
takes a lot to keep them too busy.
Other questions?
That's all I had.
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
So
Thank
we
you for
have,
having us. Thank you.
We have
When-
done interviews last night and doing
Yeah.
interviews tonight. The committee will be meeting on Thursday night and hopefully coming to a decision. Can't promise that, but that's the goal anyway. And then this would have to go on to the select board. And if they do come to a decision on Thursday night, then it would hopefully go on the October 6th select board meeting for the award of bid. I will be in touch with you one way or another, or you're welcome to Zoom in on Thursday night to hear the discussion, but we'll be in touch anyway.
Thank you all so much.
Thank
All
you
right,
so
that's
much.
great. So,
Right.
and we really do thank you for the opportunity. It was a pleasure, Linda, meeting you and seeing the Academy building. It's like Mike said, it's really a gem. So thank you all very much for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
At the church in town, this is how, if the bell's right over the opening, the rope would come right down in the middle of the opening.
Oh, yeah.
that went up.
That were dished.
Oh,
right out.
because there's so many people
Creep,
walking on them and that took you
You
up.
could never sneak up
Oh, God, no.
into the classroom.
No,
to see
no.
You were her.
And then, and then you'd go and
And then
the
her
office
arm,
was
yeah.
here
Yes,
and,
yeah.
yeah, I
And
just,
the thing that I had showed Steve is all that original beadboard in
Impressive,
that
isn't it?
hallway outside the library that they painted
I
that
have buttons.
awful
Blue.
blue, gross paint.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
some of it's coming right off because I'm sure
Sarah, I
it's
think you might
varnish,
want to
so,
hear what
yeah,
they're
you know,
talking about. They're not really talking
When you
about
paint over
anything.
varnish, I mean, the paint comes off.
Latex paint over top of oil-based varnish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's probably coming right off.
Coming right off and having, done many stripping projects with that, it's like, ooh, look at that, what's under there, and I can get this crap off.
Yeah.
The problem lies in the bead.
Yeah.
That can be terribly labor intensive,
Yes,
trying to get that stuff off.
Q-tips, lots of Q-tips.
Yeah.
Labor intensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might try to see if I
Oh,
can't
goodness.
reach the next.
So-
Let's see if they're ready.
And see if they're, yes.
But it was just so much fun and you'd go in, you'd go up the
Yeah.
stairs and then you'd come up and into the new section would be Donald Claire's typing. But if you went around that little hall and then there was a little, you'd go up into Mr. Bierce was there when I was there for English. But then there was that little tiny
Tiny
door that you
yes.
could go down over into the
Yes.
other new section
Yes.
for French. So you didn't have to go down and around.
Well, we never were allowed to use that door.
Oh, I
We
did.
Always had to go
Oh,
down
maybe
and
it's because I was the
around.
principal's daughter, or the superintendent's daughter.
Well, but Dad would come home from school board meetings and we'd hear him talking to Mom and he'd say, you can't repeat this. Do not repeat what you just heard me talking about. And so then he'd say, okay, now you can talk about it. So then we'd go to school thinking we had some big news and everybody already knew it. He said, everybody already knew that. You made us keep a secret.
I'll never,
So-
forget the year that Rick was a senior, so I was a junior, right? No, Rick was a senior, yeah, and I was a junior. And kids were throwing those stink bombs. And so all of a sudden it came over the intercom from Lennox Putnam. There will be an assembly in the gymnasium. All students must attend. Please excuse this interruption. Everybody go to the gymnasium now. So we all went to the gymnasium and in marches my dad. Right down the center, goes to the podium, and he starts screaming at the entire student body about the disrespect and this won't be tolerated and Well, Rick started to snicker. And my father whips him because that's exactly what I mean, disrespect, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah. So the assembly goes over, he marches out, gets in his car, drives off. And of course, everyone's mumbling, boy, wasn't he in a bad mood, blah, blah. Well, Dad was never home when we got off the bus. Never, ever. He was that day. Yes. Rick will never forget that day, as long as he lives. Because he was like, I cannot believe. Yeah, we got lots of trouble that day.
I tried to bribe my father to serve another 3 years on the school board so he could give me my diploma and he wouldn't do it. He would have had to, run again and serve another 3 years, but there's a picture of him giving all of my sisters their diploma, but not me.
That's because you were the last.
I know.
I got mine.
Because the Red Sox lost the World Series, I didn't even redeem myself by being born when the day they won the AL championship, but they lost the World Series and I was the fourth daughter. And, the world went to hell in a handbasket, so.
Well, that was one thing, we did all get our diplomas from Dad, which was really
Yeah.
special.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
Bill Burgess,
Leisure suit and all
Yeah.
with my father in the
Yeah.
pictures.
Bill Burgess got his from Daddy. Cara got hers. Let's see. Leanne got hers. Matthew went to Kent's Hill. And Dad had his stroke and Mother had died. And so Bill Tip didn't get
Yeah.
his from Dad because Dad couldn't have stood up to do it, but.
Yeah.
So our
So-
next people are here in person.
Oh, okay.
And they were next door at the academy. So they'll be here shortly.
They thought we were gonna meet in there, okay.
Excellent.
I told them all. I told them all the day we did the mandatory walkthrough that we would be meeting over here by the time they
Well,
had their
what's-
interviews.
You know, those bookshelves were always in that library. So when I went in again with Steve, there's still original slate on
Mhm.
one of those chalkboards.
I
and
bet.
it's like,
Oh my gosh.
we need to make sure that stays
Oh, I
right
know.
there because it's the original slate stuff.
That building was just, it was amazing.
I was looking at the pictures of a renovation. I don't know where it was. I can't remember. But they went in and took down all the whiteboards,
Yeah.
and behind one of them was I guess you could, well, it was a study
Yeah.
where they were studying history, and the whole thing was one lesson. It was.
Oh,
It was all still there.
oh,
Oh, my God.
amazing.
Yeah, it was very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love that.
When you have a seat.
Yeah.
Well, that's like when you go into Compson Hall. Hello,
Hello, good evening.
good evening.
How are
You
you?
go into Compson Hall and you find all the places where people sign.
Dennis puts their names up there and he took one and sent it.
There's
to
a
me.
recorder.
And I was all, hell yeah. And then my great uncle's was in there too. And, you know, I'm like, Dennis, you know how to make your girl cry on a Friday morning, you know, so, and then he took me and I have a picture of it actually. He took me and showed me where it was, because I said, I want a picture of Dad's.
worry
Yeah.
To keep you away from the dinner.
You hear stomachs growling, just, you know.
It's hard to see because of the,
Oh, look at that. I know that I've signed it in there. Wow.
Eric,
I think that,
Mike,
that
Jim.
one, it's hard to get the light because your camera
Yes,
is flashing on it, but.
it's
That was in
amazing.
the library?
No, that
That's
was done
inside
at Compton Hall.
Oh.
out behind the stage and
We
various
used to all
places.
sign, it's up in, they had 2 dressing rooms
Yes.
and you'd sign in there.
And then one time, you know, like his friend Buddy,
Mike Cunningham
they
from
wanted to paint
Construction
something and
Eric
Buddy said, yeah, and they painted over this one whole section in
Steve
black. And
Gribble
Dennis is like, what was he
from,
thinking? I'm like,
Context by Design.
Oh my
Unfortunately,
goodness.
nothing.
Oh my goodness.
So there's one section that Dennis is like, I can't imagine the names that must be.
Oh, I
underneath
bet.
there."
I bet.
Dennis Price really does a good job. He
He's-
loves the building. I mean,
He does, he does.
So what we've been
And just
doing
the
is-
pictures he posts on Facebook and the comments people make and, you know, the emotions that brings out.
when he talked about comedy stay in the hand of tragedy,
Yes.
I never thought that.
No.
I mean, I looked at that for
Me
40
too.
years.
I know, I know.
That was educational.
Yeah, yeah,
Sounds good.
yeah. He's something. He makes me laugh.
They did
Yeah, they
confirm it. They
identified her.
confirmed it.
I know,
Oh.
probably a parent's worst nightmare.
Mhm. It's like I told you, when I dropped Leanne off in Miami, the first day I couldn't tell you what she had on. And these people probably feel the same way. Oh, how sad.
I don't.
I hope they find him.
I don't understand the video where she encountered the police officer out there and the police officer, I only heard little bits and pieces of the newscast.
But they say that there was a passerby that had witnessed the boyfriend slapping her and punching her in the face. I'm not sure, but he contacted 911, but 911 didn't get it to the police in time or something. It's just,
They're on the Puckies,
When,
right?
when the police went there, she was pretty hysterical. He was
Yeah.
pretty calm.
Right.
It was just-
right.
It was kind of weird.
It's just so,
Yeah.
it's such a
Oh,
tragedy.
it
Oh,
is.
I can.
And now he's somewhere hiding.
Or
Maybe the
dead, or
alligator.
dead.
Maybe the alligators will get him.
He may get himself.
Good.
Maybe.
Well, no, I think they should have to live and suffer with it.
Well, they should have to, but that doesn't mean he's going
I know.
to.
I was, let's see, I was in my dining room table.
This was a girl and a guy who went on vacation together. From Florida to the
No.
west.
Loose and long.
And then
Well,
the guy drove home in the van. And nobody knew where the girl was, so a day or two was their farm.
Oh, I saw
The rest of
that.
their team is joining.
So now that, now the guy's gone, They're trying to find him.
And then there's a 911 call where she called in and they could hear him, right?
Bangor was.
Attacking him.
I turn the TV on 7 o'clock at my house. My TV isn't on all day until 7 o'clock. I turn it on and I watch. We was watching in Jeopardy.
Priority.
What I've been watching, binge watching right now is Quincy. And
Oh, I've been binge watching Family Affair.
Oh, my gosh. Sometimes when you watch these and you're like, wow, the accident.
Cabot.
Oh, I love that.
Cabot.
You know, start looking up these guys to see what happened to them.
Oh, my
Sebastian Cabot
God.
was very young when he died. He was like 56.
But he seemed old.
He seemed old, didn't he? But you know, I never realized how much I didn't like Jody.
Oh, yeah.
But you know, the new fall season started this week, and so I'm missing I got all last night time to watch NCIS, which is good.
Well, let's see, I didn't watch it. Tomorrow night, I want to get. Tomorrow night, I want to spend the time. But, oh, we don't have a meeting tomorrow night. Oh, yeah.
You don't have one. We do. Chris and I are out every night, every night this week.
But I'll tell you, what, I will not watch Dancing with the Stars. I cannot stand Tyra Banks.
I don't watch.
Oh,
any
that
of that
woman.
stuff.
His name is Stephen Carter.
And once Jeopardy is over,
I just
then
watch the
I'm
reruns of Gunsmoke.
cozy TV. You can
Bonanza. We were allowed to stay up on Sunday nights and watch
We
Bonanza
were
with Dad in black and white. Dad was colorblind.
I used to fall asleep on the couch and my mother would say, okay, it's time to go to bed. I go, no, I'm just resting.
My eyes.
So Jimmy Hopkins told me that he goes home and he watches Gunsmoke or whatever, you know, when it's.
7 o'clock every night.
Yeah, and then he goes to bed. That's what Jimmy
My
told me.
brother and I used to watch Gunsmoke and The Twilight Zone together.
Oh, no, we weren't allowed to watch the Twilight Zone.
That was too scary.
Yeah, yeah.
We used to get, but one year I dressed Shadows Kitty. And then
Yeah.
it was.
Dark Shadows, Barnabas Collins.
Yes, I would shut my bedroom light off. If my curtains were up, I would peek on the corner and shut the lights off, go in, pull the shades and then turn the light back on.
I'd crawl on my hands and
Still do
knees.
that.
I didn't get into Dark Shadows when it was popular, but when cable came into South Portland in 76,
Yeah.
and I was working at the PD and I was getting home at like 11. I started getting into reruns.
It was
Yeah.
82. I think Dina was a senior when I was homesick the day Reagan got shot. I was homesick from school that day and saw that, happen.
I was
Went to it. and then-
very pregnant, I believe,
an
with
Eric,
my
right?
second
Yeah,
child.
how about we start at 7? Eric,
Yeah.
did we-
Yeah.
Was it Eric?
Works for me. Got 3 minutes.
Do you want to start at 7?
We didn't have cable. We had the rabbit ears and we put a little bit of aluminum foil on.
The only channel changer in our adjustable rotary, you turn it.
High tech.
Dad up on the roof trying to get it to work. Change the channel.
So we're gonna get started and let the others in here.
Oh, they're there now. How many's there?
Couple, Jim and Eric.
Okay, Jim and Eric.
Yeah. So, okay, so as I mentioned earlier, so this is the building committee. And Dawn is also on the building committee, but she's going to have to recuse herself this week from the interviews and the discussion later this week. But she's still one of our members. She'll be back later. So we'd like you to go through all the questions that we sent to you. You can introduce yourselves. We won't be asking questions during your presentation because that's your time and we don't want to cut into that. And the committee will say their questions until after in about 15, 20 minutes before we end.
Okay,
Okay,
very good.
take it away.
Well, I had a nice drive down this evening. It's, beginning of fall, looking at the trees and things. So we'd like to first thank you for inviting us to be here. We're very excited about that. This is we know that it's a really important project for you in terms of the community and how you can reuse this building in a good way and give it a rebirth, per se. My name is Charles Earley. People call me Charlie. I'm the president of Lewis and Malm Architecture. Lewis and Malm was founded in 1983. And I had the pleasure of working for Don Lewis and Rick Malm for 5 years or so before they retired in 2015. And when they did, they left the company to me. And so I brought in my business partner, and we've been busy since 2015. We're in the black. We have a lot of return clients. We're very busy. We do commercial work. We do some historic renovation, restoration, preservation work, and we do some lighter, smaller projects, bread and butter things like residential once in a while.
Charlie, before you go on, I was remiss. We do have one of our committee members on the Zoom. That's Sarah up there.
Oh.
And just so you know, the speakers are here so that they can hear behind you, right up here in the ceiling.
Okay, that's good. Okay. When you work with Lewis and Malm, you work with what we call the A team. And we don't mean A team in the pity the fool type of. What we mean is that all of us, every one of the disciplines that we have on our team, we're all owners of our companies. So we have a vested interest in succeeding at what we do. And we take that very seriously. There's not a lot of filtering down of things. When you talk with us, you're talking to the people that are sitting, doing the work, making the drawings, writing the specifications, and all that sort of thing. And that's the way we like to work. We enjoy that. We've been doing it together on many projects for a long time. But every team needs to have a captain, and that's me. I have 41 years of experience. I was thrown into project management and design from the beginning. So I have a degree in architecture from Virginia Tech, and I was in Europe working for a firm over there. And they said, you're going to be the project manager because you're the only one that speaks English. And so I've been doing it for a long time, and I keep trying to get better at it. I work at it every day. But you've got to have somebody when you're doing a project like this or any project who has an overview of all the disciplines and everything that's going on, and keeps the reins on the horse, keeps the horse in front of the wagon. That's my specialty. The three components of that, of course, are scope, schedule, and budget. And the scope, interestingly enough, needs to be defined, and it gets redefined as you go through the project. Some things happen and you need to make an adjustment, or the schedule needs to be adjusted or followed and strictly, or things happen that change that schedule. And so you have to monitor that and manage that. And then the budget, of course, is the A&O of everything that you're going to be doing. And so understanding the relationship between those three, that's the team's responsibility, led by me. We avoid circle communication at Lewis and Malm. When we come to the table, everybody has a voice, but I would be the sole point of contact, and I will manage our group of people behind us. And we would look to your group to either have a project manager or a core group of people that communicate with me to keep things organized. So when you have an internal issue, we don't discuss everything, we don't get things going around the gossip table, that sort of thing. So we follow that service route. I have a couple of rules about managing this team. One is that never an email without a response. Never a meeting without an agenda. Never a document without a date. And never do anything without first establishing the goals. So for tonight, the goals that we have are, we gave you a detailed response to your RFP, and you gave back that list of questions, very good questions, and we've got our prepared answers, and we'd be glad to talk spontaneously as well in terms of that. But our first goal is that we want to answer those questions for you. The second thing is that we've got 1 hour or so to get acquainted with one another. And we hope that we can achieve that. We want to also encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to contact our references and find out what they say about working with the Lewis and Mall A team. Then a primary goal for us tonight is we want to turn our 25% chance into 100%. Because we would like to be your trusted advisors for this project. So keeping the scope and the schedule and the budget in mind, I'd like to let the rest of the team talk and introduce themselves. And I think, looks like everybody's there. Is Kyla there yet?
I don't see her.
She's not there yet. We'll let Kyla come in when she comes in, but we'll start with the gentleman over here and then we'll go to the one those online.
My name's Ken Whitney from Hewitt and Whitney Engineers. Our office is right there in Winthrop. And I am the mechanical engineer on the project. I would be the mechanical engineer responsible for the HVAC, heating, plumbing, design for the building, within the building. I've been doing this for over 30 years. And I started in Portland, worked there for about 15 years, then came up to Winthrop and combined with Colin to create the firm that we have now. And we've been charging ahead ever since.
And I'm Colin Hewitt from Hewitt and Whitney Engineers. And yes, we're right here in Winthrop. But I've been doing this for well over 30 years as well. Ken and I joined together almost 20 years ago now, we're
Yeah.
pretty close to it. So we've been working together for a long time, mechanical and I'm electrical. I'm a local boy. I grew up in Reedfield. My office is in Winthrop. I played basketball right in that gym in the early 70s. And I was also, I heard someone mention Cumston Hall. My wife and I had theater Monmouth tickets, season tickets for a number of years. And even when my kids were younger, we performed in local theater there at Cumston Hall, you know, so I'm familiar with Monmouth and I really enjoy this town. And I think I love working in Maine and I'd love to work on your project. So.
I've been working with Colin since I relocated back to the United States in 2000, came to Maine and was working at the University of Maine, Augusta, the Student Center over there. The two phases, I designed that building. And Colin was one of the first engineers I met in the state. And we've been working together ever since. Okay, thanks, Colin. Okay. So let's test the Zoom, I guess, and we can start. I don't know, you guys can't see who's up and who's down, so we'll have to figure, I'll call you by name. We'll start with my business partner, and then we'll go through civil, structural, and maybe Kyla will get on by then.
She's on now, getting on.
Oh, there she
Good
is.
evening. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
I'm Jim Tatkenhorst with Lewis and Mom Architecture. I'll be the architect of record on the project, and I've been a registered architect in Maine for 30 years. And I find this project particularly exciting since Monmouth has Cumston Hall, which was already mentioned. It's regarded as one of Maine's most revered historic buildings. So I think the bar is really high to do a great job on the Monmouth Academy. And I believe we have the team that can do it. Thanks.
Eric?
Hi, my name is Eric Dube with Trillium Engineering Group. I'm a civil engineer. I've been doing engineering for about 30 years. I also represent on the MUBEC board for the state of Maine and enjoy doing that. And I love doing these type of projects because the renovation projects for me are the best projects, historic in nature. You want to basically keep the history going on that, and being a part of this would be a great experience. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Steve?
Can't hear.
There we go. Hi, my name's Steve Rubble. I'm a Maine licensed landscape architect. Been doing this in Maine for 25 years. And prior to that, based on my undergraduate business degree, I was in logistics and started several businesses as part of a team member in hospitality and distribution and various performance areas. So I feel that this particular project, I can help you prepare for what potential uses you might have in the future for this building, and I'd love to do it. Thank you.
Those two are kind of like a tag team. One of them handling the underground stuff and the other one dealing with what's going on above ground. This is a really beautiful opportunity, the way that thing sits over on that side, and this side is the contrast to that. Okay, Mike?
Yes, my name is Michael Cunningham. I'm a structural engineer with Lincoln Haney Engineering, president of the company. I've been in this business for one form or another for 44 years. So I think I got you all beat. We really enjoy doing historic projects of all nature. We do quite a lot of them, especially working a lot in the Mid-Coast region, but also throughout the state. We can get into that a little bit later. But we find that each one of them provides a unique opportunity to put forth some cost-effective design that breathe new life into these nice old buildings that are just that oftentimes they just need some care, and we love to be responsible for making that happen. So they're always challenging, always have one-of-a-kind solutions, although there are definitely similarities, and we'll probably get into that sometime in our hour. But we are excited about the opportunity.
Okay, now we have somebody that makes us all look good. That's Kyla Magnussen from Preferred Construction Management. She is our cost estimator.
I'm Kyla. I'm with PCM. We Preferred Construction Management has been around for over 25 years. We've got a few offices. I primarily work in Maine and on Maine projects. I would say 90% of my work is Maine work, and a good portion of that is historic or repurposing historic buildings. So definitely an exciting project.
I think the most important aspect of cost estimating is to have a professional that is independent from the architects and the engineers. So the opinion that you're getting, and I say this also because it's a municipal project, and that when you have the community speaking in, it disarms, oh, that's an engineer's estimate or that's an architect's estimate. That's all she does. We'll get to it more later on when we talk about that specific topic. So it would help us because we've got 6 pages of thoughts to go through them in the order that you gave them to us. Is that okay?
Please.
That's fine. Okay. So the first one is describe a project that you've been involved with that would be relevant to our project. In a prior life, real quickly, I did the historic restoration of Lorimer Chapel at Colby College. It was done in 2 phases, and the purpose of the project was to bring it back to the way the architect had designed it, because they had made a few changes. They put an asphalt shingle roof on it. They wanted to go back to the copper batten. That copper batten roof that's on there is exactly the way it should be in terms of expansion and contraction design that was in the original architect's documents. But another one that's relates in terms of municipal is the restoration of Castine's Town Hall, which I had the pleasure of doing with Don Lewis about 7 years ago. That building had several missing elements in terms of the detailing. Brackets were gone from the windows, and we saw them in the drawings, but they were no longer on the building, and they were gone from the building completely. They'd all been removed. And they were pretty important, small feature, but pretty important. So we put them back on. We redid the windows. We redid the complete facade and the roof and the cupola. And one interesting thing was that used to be, that building had the high school, Castine High School gymnasium on the 2nd floor. And of course, it made a lot of noise when the kids came over after school, because they still do that and play basketball. So we had to put in a new floor. And as we were looking at the floor before we tore it out, there was a logo in the floor. And there was, when they painted the logo, it was an outline type lettering, and whoever painted it forgot to paint one of the letters inside. He painted the others and he forgot to paint the other one, and it was sealed and done, and that's the way it was. So when we rebuilt the floor and made it soundproof to more soundproof, we put it back exactly the way it was and did not fill that in. So that was, paying attention to what little things like that are part of that historic preservation or people that would in town remember that type of thing. And then we did things in, some of the restrooms were new, but we made them look historic in terms of their tiling and things like that. And then Mike, I think you wanted to talk about some of the projects that you've done.
Yeah,
historic.
we have done a lot. Probably the one that we're working on right now that's the most significant is Lamont Block in downtown Brunswick, and that is requiring extensive structural reinforcement. We also have one going in Augusta on 333 Water Street. It's or 333 to 337, I think. It's the old Oddfellows Hall, and that's in the process of being renovated. We won an award a couple of years ago for the repurposing of what was a Mary Meeting barn in Edgecombe. So these are big projects and small projects. We reinforced the roof at the Blaine House, just a number of them. One of the ones that I think is most similar to your building though is it was a church that we did in Edgecombe, and they had the exact same roof system. And in that particular group job, they actually were experiencing quite a bit of sagging. And I think I commented when I looked at that, I said, I'm surprised this isn't sagging more. But it apparently yours is holding up much better than that one. But anyway, it was the exact same roof system, had a little bit longer span. That might have been part of the reason. And of course, what we've seen in the crawl space there, I think we're going to have some water issues to address, and some rot there to address. But that's pretty typical in older buildings and crawl spaces. So we've seen a lot of that.
I'll let Steve talk about one he did, because your site, when you remove the middle school wings, you're going to bring this building back to its original ambience in terms of the way it was sited. And it represents a huge opportunity for the surrounds. And that's why we have Steve on the team, because without knowing yet exactly what you're going to do with the building, that could have an influence on what you do on the grounds. So Steve, could you talk about, I put that Orono Village green, and you might have something else that you worked on.
Right, yeah, thanks, Charlie. Yes, first, let me just say that I completely understand that the project at hand is to remove the extraneous building from the core building that you want to preserve and modernize, update, whatever the architectural word is. That's why we have Charlie on board and Jim. But what I am here for is to help you understand or understand what the possible visions are for the use of the space. Is it a performance space? Is it a gathering space? People going to have corporate Christmas meetings, or holiday meetings, or recognitions, or poetry readings, and all of these things. Are there going to be weddings there? And all of these things have different implications for the logistics of the site. Catering in, whether there's a kitchen or not, but catering in, foods and whatnot, or just is there going to be a tent on the outside? Do we need structural soils to hold that up? Do we need structural soils for parking? Or can it simply be loam and lawn, and don't drive anything on it because the car will sink? But it's helping you, and when I say this, I'm only talking a brief meeting, helping you talk through the different ideas that might be envisioned for this building, casting out anything you definitely don't want to see, and then seeing how does this building coexist with the playground and the other building that are on the site, so that they each have a mutual benefit for the property in a whole and for the community in general.
Eric, do you have any projects that you'd like to mention that you've worked on in terms of historic context?
probably the biggest historic context project that we're currently working on. We've been working on it since 2005 due to funding and things like that, is the Abyssinian Meeting House in Portland, Maine. It's the third oldest African-American meeting house in the US, and they're restoring it, and they've been doing it for a while, and we're finally getting some major funding, some donations, and that's been great, and they're on the final leg. So hopefully we get that completed within the next 4 or 5 years.
Good, thank you.
I worked on that building 20 years ago. They did a design for that never was funded.
You know, and we also realize Maine is a big, small town. And that's another reason why we like the A-team, because we have to work with each other again somewhere.
Well, a couple of these projects are projects that I worked on, like the Lane House. I worked on the complete electrical renovation of that building where all the wall coverings couldn't be touched. So you're gonna put in new outlets and new switches and not pull in, you know, not cut into the wall. And that was when Governor Baldacci was the governor. So it was a little while ago. When they had knob and tube wiring, if you know what that is, very old wiring in the building. Also did a Portland City Hall project where they had architectural drawings from 1905. It's the oldest architectural drawings I actually worked on in a building. And they showed panels. They didn't show wiring or anything, but they showed the electrical panels.
Wow.
Kyla, is there any specific project you want to mention?
One that is slightly larger, but still relevant. We worked on the downtown Waterville Arts Building, where they essentially, or they're going to essentially demo the building, but preserve the facade and build a building behind it to incorporate that, to keep that still that Main Street look. And preserve that the original intent of the facade on Main Street. So that was an exciting project, but also like a repurpose. And we looked at a bunch of different options. We looked at salvaging the building entirely, demoing the building entirely, and a little bit of both. So there's that was although very large, relevant in a repurpose kind of situation.
So, knowing to what level you think of historic and what that means to you, that's a whole analysis and a series of interviews to figure out whether we're talking preservation or ambience of the building. And you're not on the register. You could get back on the register if you were going the purest route, taking it back to where it was. But that's something we'll talk about in that other question coming up. The next question that you asked was about describing the scope of our property survey work to be completed. I think we're unique in this regard because Eric's company, Trillium, actually does boundary and topographic survey work. Typically, in architecture and engineering, we would hire, or you would hire, a surveyor to do that type of survey, boundary and topography, and you would pay them. So they're in the budget, but it's not in our fee. It's just in the budget. But Eric has that capacity to handle any boundary and topographic surveying that we need to do. There's also the question of geotechnical. There was a specific question to that later on, but I could probably address that in the same manner. Geotechnical investigations are done by companies like SW Cole or others, and that is not included in our fee, but we help you structure it and get the quote from them and that sort of thing, make sure they're doing what they need to be doing. And they would actually advise us, with Mike's help, what's necessary if Mike feels that we need to make sure we know what's underneath this, and we probably do. Another one is existing conditions in photographic and narrative survey. We do that, going through the building with all the disciplines and photographing it and documenting that what's good and what's not, what we recommend doing about certain things, and sometimes presenting the alternatives. And again, that difference between historic preservation or new. In Europe, I did a lot of buildings where you walk through the town and you see in Basel, Switzerland, antique buildings, 1300s, 1400s. You walk through the doors and it's a fully modern building behind the scenes. Don't you think this building, we don't need to tear it down? Don't be afraid of that. But the interior of this, we could imagine it, when you walk in it, you don't get the same awe feeling that you do from the outside. And you can look for components of that. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but we would do a whole report called an existing facility analysis where we get to know the building and let the building talk to us. Takes a couple of trips down to do that and really document it well. And then a site development survey. That would be things that Eric and Steve would do in terms of some of the things Steve already talked about, looking at these demolition options in the budget that we put in the pro forma budget, looking at the two quotes you had. The smaller quote for the less stuff of just the middle school portion being demolished generated a low square foot value. So I didn't bother to put the more expensive demolition in there, knowing that 1.7 million is your limit. Because if you want to spend half, a third of it on that, more power to you, but it just is going to reduce what you can do with the historic building. So that's a conversation to be had. But there'd be a complete site development survey where we look at all the information, we talk about the opportunities and constraints, the views and the vistas. There'd be some more photography and narrative worked on in that sense, and to just start developing ideas and bring examples of what could happen and generate some enthusiasm and excitement for what this building could be, so that you can afford afterwards through some sort of revenue generation to keep that building going, and also potentially excite donors and get some, get an endowment hopefully started so that it can become self-supporting. And then an action matrix is something I do that drives my teams crazy, but it's a complete spreadsheet of the entire project on one piece of paper. And it really breaks everything down into the zones and says, okay, here's all the things that we're going to try to accomplish. And here's all the people that are going to do it. And then it's the initial point where we can then give Kyla some drawings and she can do what's called an order of magnitude estimate early on. And it works very well at the schematic design level. So that's another type of survey that is a tool that I've developed myself through the years to really make it simple to understand that scope that we were talking about. And then, of course, getting it into the budget. So those are how we interpreted what you meant by property survey. Those are the things we would offer to do. Question number 4 was that the town has limited funds and would like to understand how you will manage your design costs so that we don't get surprises. And so that we have the services needed to plan, design, bid, and build the project. And we all know what's going on in this country and the world right now, and what the impact it's had in terms of manufacturing, shipping, labor shortages, the whole 9 yards. And the person that is closest to being able to estimate that is sitting right over there, Kyla. She will talk in a minute about what she does and how she deals with that. But it starts with this process of, as early as possible, start getting ideas at the schematic design level, that order of magnitude for the cost estimate, so that we can have our come to Jesus meeting and say, okay, we can afford this, or whoops, that we can't afford that, and try to start developing the transparency in terms of costs so that you know where the costs are hitting. I think of things, when I think about budgets, I think of the 3 M's. When you're talking about money, and if you're not understanding the meaning of that money, it's going to lead to misunderstandings. So you have to reverse it and say, in order to avoid misunderstandings, you've got to understand the meaning of the money. It's not a number. How did that number get generated? It got generated by quantities, materials, choices of quality, what has to be done, the must-haves versus the nice-to-have. things, structure is a must have. New windows might be a nice to have. Not necessarily a must have unless the windows aren't going to be energy efficient, things like that. So when we're working on projects and things, we work according to written proposals and agreements on what things are going to be. What are our tasks? And we would develop that together with you. If that changes along the way, then we do supplemental agreements for that specific change that's taking place. And then we have included in our RFP response a detailed description of that process that we go through phase by phase. I won't get too far into that right now, but that's in our proposal for you to read and enjoy reading. We ask a lot of questions. I can drive people crazy with questions and documentation because it's all the devil's in the details. That's my job, to make sure that Ken and Colin and Eric and Steve and Jim and Mike and Kyla know what we're doing and why we're doing it and to what level, to what quality level. And then there's the back and forth between us when they start making their recommendations.
Crazy.
But that's back to that never a meeting without an agenda, and never a document without a date. The sooner we can start figuring out what it is we're doing, and the more information we can pull together, the better it is for understanding that scope. We always document our answers, and that's really important. I said that about emails and responses. Those are just written rules in me. When I receive an email, you deserve a response. And that has to happen within a certain amount of time. You can't wait a week because we'll forget. So we always do that. We communicate very well internally, and we use a lot of different tools for that electronically, and of course Zoom and Dropbox or something like that to distribute documents to one another and that sort of thing. On back, because we're talking about cost, the pro forma budget I set up, that's the state standard model for the three-part budget. And there are a lot of line items in there that are zeroed out because it says to be determined. I don't know certain things that the town or the committee would have to decide they want to do or need to do, whether it's, furniture, fittings and equipment, or a grand opening or things like that. And you want to have reserves. But that's all in our proposal in that pro forma budget, and the only thing that's concrete right now on that budget is the bottom line, that 1700000. That is something that we have to work that budget. It's a tool, and we can never go over that number. We know that. So you will see that budget over and over and over again from us at the different project phases. And it doesn't stop after the bidding. However we do this, it happens throughout the project on a monthly basis with the general contractor. So you always know, where do we stand? How are we coming along? Are we staying in budget? And then we often build in safeguards. It's a renovation project, so you're going to want to carry allowances because there are things that we're not going to be able to know. And they're hidden inside that building, and you discover those. We don't do forensics unless you provide a budget to do advanced forensics, and we hire a contractor, and we'll get into that a little bit more with the construction management advantages and disadvantages a little bit later on. But that regular budget monitoring is a conversation where we present, here's where we think you are, and then you can say, yep, we agree with that, or no, we need to move this there. We do carry contingencies in that budget. There's a design contingency because we can't read minds. We have to hear from you, and you have to tell us what your directives are for the project. How do you want the project to be? What components do you want to have in it? What do you want it to do? We're firm believers in that architecture and engineering is found in the heart of the user need. It's not about our design egos and our publications or anything like that. It's about what do you want? What are you trying to accomplish? Because on opening day, we want all of you to say, this is exactly what we wanted. This is exactly what we needed. And not have somebody walk in and say, I thought we were gonna get X, Y, or Z. So Kyla, could you please elaborate more on your role as a cost estimator?
Charlie, can I just do a time check with you? You're at 7:34 at this point, and we definitely want to leave at least 15 minutes for the committee to be able to ask you questions. So somebody has to be the clock police. That's me.
Okay. Thank you.
So a little bit about, I guess, accuracy early on, and making sure you have the right costs up front for your planning and for design. We work with a lot of architects and engineers and design firms, but we also work with a lot of contractors, and really at all stages. Sometimes we'll do bids for contractors and solicit subcontractor pricing. Sometimes we'll just do their early pricing, but we're constantly getting feedback from contractors and subcontractors in the marketplace, as well as vendors and distributors when it comes to equipment. So we are constantly updating our database. We've got a team of 6 estimators, and it's just really an everyday conversation that we have. Luckily, about 50% of our work is with contractors, so we're also getting feedback every day on schedule, long lead items, materials that are now taking much longer to procure than previous months, what's being forecasted for the next few months to a year, and so on. So we're constantly updating our database, and so when it comes to early estimating, we're relying on that information, and we're trying to make sure that we have the most up-to-date information, so that when we're projecting for your budget or for your project, we're as accurate as we can be. And like Charlie had mentioned, there's other ways there's additional items that will include, like allowances, especially when it comes to like a restoration type project where you want to make sure you're carrying enough for a brick repointing or recocking windows. Those are things that can sometimes balloon, and we want to make sure we're carrying and covering those costs early on. And like Charlie said, it is detailed out in the proposal, but we do early estimating, and even though it might be an order of magnitude cost per square foot by trade, it's actually I sit down and I'm detailing out the quantities. It's just behind the scenes. And I think we've got a pretty good track record as far as initial estimate versus bid, especially with this project team. And I hope that kind of answers the questions as far as staying on budget and staying within your overall goal.
Thank you, Kyla. Moving right along, do you feel this project is best suited for design, bid, build, or construction manager, CM, for delivery? If we use a CM form, does your proposal include working with the town to procure a CM in coordination with CM? The delivery methods, we're accustomed to all the delivery methods. Design, bid, build on a historic building, we would recommend you do a pre-qualification process with the general contractor so that you don't end up with a guy in a pickup truck saying he can do this job. This is a specialized approach to construction. You've got to have experience in it. The trouble with the pre-qualification process is that you have to make who you're going to pre-qualify. You've got to set up the criteria and then stick to it if they don't meet it, because you could have a contractor come back and say, why wasn't I, and create a bunch of legal mess. Why wasn't I pre-qualified? I'm qualified, I can do this. So bonding is important, historic proof that they've done similar projects, that type of thing. Otherwise, design, bid, build is what we mostly do, but we'd also do construction management and design build projects. We don't think this is suited for design build. It's a historic building. Construction management, on the other side, there are pros and cons. You've got an existing building, so you've got something to look at. So the sooner you get a contractor looking at it, the better you're going to have, the sooner you're going to have conversations about what needs to be done that come not only from our engineers, but also from their opinion. And they do it every day, all day too, in the field. So they often have good ideas, and we just have to be open to that. But bringing that construction manager in early is beneficial. It can also be detrimental because people like our mechanical and electrical engineers are designing a system that someone else is deciding whether or not they want to build it that way. And they make cuts. And when they make cuts, they're not doing it, you know, $1 to $1. They're doing it to some other reduced value on the dollar. And now the system has been compromised in terms of what it is set out to do. And that decision, the responsibility legally is the stamp, the engineer's stamp on the drawing, and not the contractor's. He doesn't have one. The other thing is that a construction manager is often a general contractor, and they're just putting on a different hat and saying, I'm a construction manager. They do not bid the project. They estimate the project as a construction manager. So you have to hold them to that task. And then during construction, you've got to hold them to that task because they'll say, well, when we bid this, we thought this. Well, no, they're a partner. They're a team member. They're part of the design process. So that's a whole big discussion, what the delivery method should be. We're open to whichever you want. We've talked a little bit about this. Some proposers mentioned historic preservation. Please explain what your thoughts are. If you want to be a purist about it, that's inside and outside everything the way it once was. And that's going to be expensive. We don't recommend it for this building. We think you should look at the exterior and do as much as you can that makes sense. And if we're making any adjustments, we make them with respect for that building. But the exterior envelope looking as close to the way you want it to look and the way it did look. But a lot of things changed. The Collins work, the signage, the HVAC exit duct, exhaust ducting and intake ducts and things like that, grills. On the inside, a fully modern building is going to be more efficient. So that's another thing that weighs into that decision between historic preservation and respect for the history. And when you do that modern interior, there's lots of ways to continue the history inside with exhibits, display cases, artifacts, storytelling that goes back in the history of Monmouth Academy and talks about that. I had the pleasure of designing the new Hampden Academy. And if you look at the new Hampden Academy, there are a lot of elements that are from the historic building that we took. Those elements, changed scale, changed location, changed what it was, but we took it from the original. So everybody feels like that new building is a Hampden Academy. So there's things you can do in construction. We want to get to your questions, so I'm going to go and I'm going to give you my notes.
Good.
Please expand on what your proposal includes for construction services. Okay. Construction administration services in one word is it's office work for us, architects and engineers. The field work is once a month, twice a month. We come and look and observe and see what's going on. But there's a whole lot of things that we do after the bid, helping you with the contract, doing the submittals, making sure that they understand what the drawings and specifications say so that they bring the right materials to the site, answering their requests for information, giving them our architect supplemental instructions that we write when things change or when we say, we want to give them more information, or you come with something new and want something to be changed. We do that. We also handle the requisitions for you and set those up. And I run a very slick meeting that's pre-programmed. I call the superintendent a couple of days before the meeting and go through, what have you done? What are you doing? Where are you going? Do you have any problems? Do you need anything from us? So that by the time we get to the table, we're going through bullets for the large part. So we can get to the requisition and get to being paid. Prior to all that, we do the pre-construction meetings. We write all the minutes for those type of meetings. What else do? We monitor the allowance usage and the change order proposals, and then the change orders once you've had a chance to review them and approve them. Like I said, we come twice a month to the site. At the end of the job, we'll do the punch list. The punch list is 2 pages. If it's more than 2 pages, we're not going to punch it. We'll just say, sorry, you're not done. because it's supposed to be the things that need to be made good, not the things that are still yet to be done. Then we will issue the certificate of substantial completion, and we'll enter the warranty period. We're on call throughout that 1 year, and at the end of 1 year, we'll do a 1 year walkthrough and make sure everything is okay. And of course, during the warranty period, if something comes up, we manage that for you. All those services are included. The one that's not included in that would be a clerk of the works or architect's representative. That's an additional service because that's somebody that's down here part-time or full-time, depending on the nature of the work. And they are reporting to the whole team, owner, contractor, and consultants and architects, so that we all can stay abreast of what's happening. That's a very important position to have, especially on a building like this. That is not a position that has any authority. It's an observer, it's a reporter, it's somebody that's checking what's happening, but he does not engage in decision-making. That comes back to the responsible parties. So the discussions that we have not included, it's pretty clear when you look at our pro forma budget. There are things like land and the surveys that we already talked about. If there's any traffic engineering or DEP permitting required, hazardous material abatement, you've got the biggest, baddest hazardous material report I've ever seen. They really, everything's in there. And then we don't do that, and we don't handle the abatement for that. We can support, but we don't do that. The construction manager costs, of course, are not included in our fee. That would be a separate fee. It's usually 4 to 6%, depending on who you hire. Legal and furnishings and fittings, any special communications, special security systems, moving, temporary space, things like that, grand opening. Special inspections for like Mike, if you want him to do that process, that would be an additional service for him to come on site when the structure has been repaired. We recommend it, but we can't insist on it. He would do his normal visit once or twice during the project, but special inspections are a regimented approach, and seismic investigations are not included. I put some commissioning in there, but it's an assumed cost. We'd have to confirm that if we wanted to do that. And I've already mentioned the clerk. So I'm on the last one.
I think you can probably combine 8 and 9 because they look a little.
Well, I did, to my knowledge, that was a,
Okay.
that was the
Yep.
one about all things that are
Yep.
not
Yep.
included.
We talked a lot about construction costs already.
Yeah.
Right. Review your approach to estimating construction costs and your opinion on the adequacy of the current budget. The most important thing is that we start on day one thinking about it, and we start programming the information flow and the documentation flow so that we have a paper trail so that we know what we're asking Kyla to estimate. And really quickly, we do schematic design is an order of magnitude based on a database that is based on PCM's nationwide database and tailored to Maine. And that is, I can tell you, it's very accurate. I've seen projects where she's estimated at the order of magnitude, and we get to the end and it looks good at bid and it matches. And she's done detailed estimates after that. So at the end of design development, she'll do a takeoff, the first takeoff. That's going to be a 20-page estimate for the project. You're going to be able to find every part of the building expressed in that estimate. That's when you can really see the cost transparency. You can identify then out of the CSI positions where the heavy hitters are when there's a cost problem. On the basis of that, if we need to, we will do a cost cutting exercise with you. And we'll say, okay, you asked us to do this, we've priced it. Now this is more expensive than we thought. You don't think we can bear it. So if you do this, then you'll save this much. Now, either you can punt it, or let's look at this and see if it's a single trade item that would be easy to bid as an alternate bid or something, and let the market tell you the exact number. It doesn't kill it at that point. It just puts it into a different category and doesn't slow us down in the decision-making process. So that's another thing we do. So that DD estimate is a really important one. That's why we're trying to get as much information ahead of that Because at DD, we want to have the design developed, we want to have it estimated, so that when we get to construction documents, we're doing exactly what that says. We're preparing the documents for construction. We're not estimating anymore. But when we get the construction documents and the specifications finished, Kyla will then do another round and she will review the estimate. Anything that got changed will be checked. And so there are actually 3 points in time where cost estimating takes place. And it's tailored to whatever happens in between. I've noticed in recent years that people want to know, what is it going to cost before we start? Our process is to help you bring your project into budget. We can't answer questions we don't know the answers to. So that design process is actually, the reason it exists is to tailor things and to adjust and to react and to respond to what your needs are, and not to, it's not in our interest to inflate that. It's in our interest to meet that. I have 9 projects that we've done since we took over Lois and Mom at Kennebec Valley Community College. Every one of those jobs has turned money back to the client. And you can ask them if they're happy about it. Because they still have more. So that's pretty much like that. Now, under the CM approach, they're responsible to estimate. We would recommend that we keep Kyla on the team to review and keep them honest and check their estimates and make suggestions and push them to complete it and say, if something's missing, hey, what about this? What about that? Contractors, general contractors, they have a tendency to price what you tell them to price. And then they can say, well, you didn't tell me to price that. But our job is to think holistically. And I think Kyla mentioned that. She's looking at what's the average when you're going to go out to competitive bidding of the 10 or 8 or 10 people that are bidding it. She's not looking for the low bid. She's looking for what's the average between those people. Where's the field of money in terms of what the project might cost.
Charlie, I'm gonna cut you off. So we have time for the committee to ask questions. Good job.
Excellent.
I'll take your notes. I'll make sure everyone gets them. Committee questions.
I have a question as an architect. Do you decide the type of roofing that we would put on a building, like a metal, slate type roof, or just asphalts or architectural asphalts, or?
That's a good question. We don't decide anything. You're the owner.
Okay, but I mean, do you advise? Do you say?
We advise. We politely provoke response.
Okay, so.
We bring alternatives to you and we can say to you, okay, asphalt shingle, we would recommend you do a duration by Owens Corning. We have reasons why. That'll be your most economical roof. But here's what a metal roof would have for advantages. It's going to be a 50-year roof versus a 15 to 20-year roof.
Right.
They'll give you a warranty for 130 years, but it's not going to last that long. So yes, and there's, if you want it to look like slate, there's real slate. There's synthetic slates. Everything's up there price wise.
Okay, I just wanted.
We bring alternatives to the table, present them to you, and then you can choose.
Keeping with the reason that so many of us voted to keep this building is that's Monmouth Academy. And to a lot of us, it's the building. It's that front facade. When you drive by, it just brings memories. It's Monmouth. And so I think a lot of us are really hoping to keep that front as close to what it looked like before it got into disrepair. So keeping the look of the old building, but utilizing the inside for more modern things, I think is what we're looking at. So going into it, knowing that there is this attachment to that building, do you recommend that we, start at the bottom, of course, start at the bottom and work up. But I mean, we have the bell tower that we're really, really concerned about, and that the front columns and things like that. And I'm sure you've looked at that all knowing, do you recommend trying to preserve, restore,
We had a few.
put a Band-Aid on it?
Yeah, we had a few ideas when we looked at it, and it depends on what you're gonna use it for.
Mhm.
So that front entrance is a little bit unique
Okay.
in that the door width in the front, you go inside and something else happens, you feel like you're in a closet. And I think it was Steve that pointed out, said we're having weddings, that'd be a great place to photograph, but you might want to look at the way that those panels were done, and you might do something that looks right and looks historic, but is also contemporary, so that at night, when you have a night shot, you see more than just white. You could have light coming from it like a beacon. Now, those are just ideas. We put them on the table, we show you what that can look like, and we talk about it. It has to follow the function as well. But the forensics of finding out where the punky wood is and that sort of thing, and is it gonna be expensive to replace it up on the top of Lorimer Chapel? They had big columns up there, and they were held on with 2 nails. 12 stories of scaffolding up, and you can get reproductions of things if you need them. And you can have things restored. Mark McCauley does window restoration. It's prohibitively expensive to do it if you, that's the purest approach. But you can get good architectural windows that are going to help your building efficiency, it's going to help your operating costs through the life of the building, because your HVAC system can be balanced better if you think that way. So we would, again, bring alternatives to help you deal with each step of the way, and we'll point them out. That's part of that existing conditions analysis. Sorry.
That was part of what I remember about Monmouth Academy is that front facade.
Yes.
That's what I remember. So I think that's what the
Right.
townspeople want.
Yes, I think that's what a lot of them voted for. The other thing that's come up from a lot of people is, what if we had to put in an elevator? We had someone say something about Lula, which is, okay, thank you. Whew, that was quick, but
There's a better way.
okay.
First of all, and I think we had that conversation when we walked through. What's the use? If it's a public use, yes. Second floor, you're gonna need an elevator. If they're gonna serve the basement, yes. If you're going just between 2 floors, you can use what's called a vertical lift platform. We have a version of that over in the gym. That's an open type elevator. Those are the most economical elevators. If you don't know what's going to happen on the second floor, you can build the location, the shaft, get the fire marshal to permit it and say, this is a future item that we're going to put in later. You just saved $100,000 by doing it that way. So if you don't absolutely know whether the upstairs is going to be, call it a classroom, or it's going to be a series of rooms that service a wedding party or whatever, you've got to understand your program before you can make some of those decisions. But there are ways you can serve this with a vertical lift. You can serve 14 feet. You can't go through 3 floors. So then you go to a full elevator, and they have to be stretcher depth, because you're putting, now in an existing building like this, within the confines of that building that exists, you don't have to put the stretcher size. It's when you go outside the building, if you put it on the building as an
attachment.
as an attachment, then it has to be stretcher size by the code. So there are ways to work with the elevator code and work with the elevator Stanley Quinn and work it out. We see that a lot of times with churches and buildings that are of this type of unknown use. We have to get that defined first. Alternatives. Variables into constants. That's what we're trying to do. Get all the variables on the table and then start taking the things away that don't work for you. And you end up with a couple of choices, then you make the right one.
Well, we're gonna probably need some conceptual drawings for different possible uses of the building.
Right.
And then we're gonna have to figure out exactly what we really want the building to do.
Exactly.
You know, versus kitchen, full-blown kitchen versus
catering kitchen.
You know, catering type kitchens. I mean, a lot of those things are gonna be budgetary driven, unfortunately.
Right.
We'd like to have the beautiful stuff, but our budget is fixed.
We're gonna try to fundraise.
But we still can only spend.
Any questions before we let these guys go?
The only thing that I wanted to mention is the fact that, because we have a budding property, all the land in behind the fairgrounds and all of that is also town property, knowing that, you have a landscape architect on board to help us figure out how we can have inside, outside events and also make it look beautiful. One of the things I said to Steve when we were looking at the building, of course, I grew up here and I've been here forever, but the maple tree on the right-hand side, that maple tree's always been there. So, can we knock down the A-wing and the maple tree survive that, because that maple tree has always been there and it's a beautiful tree. And in my head, that tree is in my mind's eye all the time, and knowing if we can come up with that inside outside plan to have it flow and make it beautiful, that's really important.
That's why we wanted to have Steve on the
Yes,
team.
right, yeah.
Because he's got a lot of experience, and it's a special art to think about the land use and the way it's going to work. And like right now, it's asphalt that relates very poorly to the school. It's just
Exactly.
functional. But it doesn't have anything to do with that historic building.
No.
And so now you have a golden opportunity to at least get rid of the middle school wings and then optimize that. But if you do that, you don't want to prejudice anything that else that could happen. So having an innovative mind like Steve on the project is a real conversation to be had, and put ideas out and discuss them, look at the pros and cons.
So thank you.
Thank you very much.
All of you.
Can we ask one of our questions?
Well, we are at to be
At the
fair
limit?
to everyone, we've given everyone an hour. I
Okay.
don't want to be accused of favoritism here. Let me just tell you our process from here. We did interviews last night, interviews tonight, and this committee is getting together on Thursday night to hopefully make a decision, but not necessarily. So we don't want to, put any kind of deadline on their determination. We will get back in touch with you. It will be a Zoom meeting. So if you want to Zoom in and see, the discussion, hear the discussion, feel free, because everything that we do has to be out in the public. And if they do make a decision on Thursday night, then it is going to go to the select board right after that, hopefully on October 6th, so that the select board can award the bid. And then once that happens, we can start moving ahead.
Okay.
But we will be
So
in
you're
touch
talking
with
about
you.
this Thursday?
This Thursday
Yes,
night is their
Thursday,
decision night, hopefully.
Of course, she kept telling everyone it was Friday, but no, it's
Oh,
Thursday.
after a couple of times, they slapped me upside the head. It's Thursday. So thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I'll make sure they all get it.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Think
It's a
you
pleasure.
knew my brother-in-law used to work over with you, Ted Gifford.
Oh,
Thank you.
Very much. Oh, thank you.
So
very
Did you
much.
My
graduate
brother-in-law.
from Winthrop? If you went
Okay,
to
oh,
Reed, or did you
No,
go?
I went to Kansas.
Yeah,
City.
all the Giffords went there.
Yeah.
My husband's Todd.
Oh, he is.
Hi,
Yes,
how are you?
yes.
Okay.
Well, thank you
Yeah,
so
I know
much.
he lives in Monmouth. He did.
My grandfather's the only Sanborn that
Thank you very
went
much.
to
Thank you so
graduated
much.
from Kent Hill, as
Yeah.
opposed to growing up and
Thank you.
having 6 generations
Oh.
of the family
We got a
here.
plan.
Yeah,
Good.
that was,
Uh-huh.
he was born in 1908, so he would have been, graduating. And I have a picture of him on the lawn at Kent Hill
Is that right?
with all the names of the people underneath it.
Yeah.
And we sit there and read the names when we're brushing our teeth, and one of them was Nespicable. His last name was Nespickle. And we laugh at that all the time.
I knew you looked familiar.
Yeah, Todd's
Donna Lynn.
Donna Lynn, that's right.
Christmas parties and
Yep.
whatever, so.
But Ted worked over with Hewitt and.
Yeah, he worked with us.
You
a
worked
while.
with Ted for a while.
Yeah, yep.
So-
Can I get the committee together for just a couple minutes? I'm gonna ask.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Nice to drive. Are you driving back to Does he drop back to?
He does, Winterport.
Winterport. Oh, gosh.
I just drive to West.
I don't Thank you.
I do love that photograph. We use that marketing photograph all the time.
Yeah.
It won design awards back
Yeah,
then.
it did. So I was just. It was
Nice.
very nice.
Don, don't leave.
Very good.
Oh, I guess.
Thank
I want to get your feeling on this, so.
For the.
I've been, which
Reference checks? You want to talk about reference checks, maybe
It'll be
before Thursday night?
sale at the base mill.
Well, she's gonna make them for us and ask her, she'll put them on her website for us as well.
you know all of them, right? You've known all these groups.
Turk this was the first time I've met Turk.
Okay.
I've worked with.
A lot of people that want.
Yeah.
Lots.
Couple times and Charles in particular, and he does a good job. He's very, he's actually very practical. I know he's very determined, but he's very practical.
I just didn't know if you wanted to.
He doesn't sound like he has the architect ego
He doesn't.
that a lot of architects have.
There are many, there's only a few that we've worked with it when you ask questions,
Yeah,
or if they have questions, they ask. One is Mr. Earley, and another is a fellow by the name of Brian Duffy down in Portland. And he will actually, when he's designing, he'll reach out to us, for example, because there's new technologies all the time that may be a little more expensive to purchase, but it saves a lot of money on.
I think he left.
On labor. And so this, Charles says, I did the Hebron Elementary School, which is in here, it's one of his Hebron Station School. And he spoke of UMA Student Center. We did the first part of the Student Center. And there were a lot of challenges, and, he's very